All right, so our example for today is thinking about working with charts. So working with charts, there's some things that are not especially intuitive about charts. And so we're going to kind of show you some of those things, and we're going to do a kind of a nice little example today in charts. And we're going to pick up where we left off on our county comparison census data. So this is the file that I ended up with in class a few weeks ago when we built this tool that allows us to, well, let's see, I think I've got here, developer macro. Did I make a macro for clearing this stuff off? Developer, not record macro. Oh, macro, here it is. Come to options, clear data options. Did I put a hotkey on it? I didn't put a hotkey on it. Apparently I wrote the code that would clear it off, but it's just basically the same as deleting those columns. So I'm on the comparison sheet and I've deleted all the columns. And remember what we're doing here is we're saying I want to compare, some set of counties. And so I select the county that I'm interested in. I guess I'm going to go to like the counties I grew up in, which were in California. So I can find California. Oh, there's Florida, California. I was raised in San Diego County. So we're going to compare San Diego County to Orange County, where my dad worked, and San Bernardino County, which San Bernardino, by the way, is the largest county in the country, geographically. All right, so we've got these, and we can now kind of look at the population, all these population numbers here. But what we'd really like to do is we'd like to make this so that I could say, you know what, I want to be on this one right here, and I want to make a chart that just charts this one. I want to see those things on a chart. And then I'll pick another one, make those things have a chart, and then just have those charts just with one click, have those charts just kind of pop in and organize themselves on the sheet. That's the task for today. So let's begin by recording ourselves making a chart. We'll get the code, we'll jumpstart our code with that, and then we'll modify it and make it all nice and proper. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and select the data that I'm interested in. So let's do under 18 years of age. Do they under 18 years of age? This is row 11. I want to chart that, and then I'll do a control click and get my headers here. I just want to build a column chart for that data. Okay, so I have that selected, and I'm going to choose record myself. Okay, so I'm on my developer tab, record macro. Wouldn't hurt to record myself selecting the data, but I don't need it selected or record that part. I'll say, okay, I just want to make the chart. So insert, and we're doing this first chart here, this column chart, and this first simple chart. That looks like a great chart. Now, because I'd like to see what code happens when I move the chart, I'm going to drag the chart somewhere and just drop it somewhere else so I can get code of moving it. And I'm not sure what it'll record, but let me go ahead and record myself setting the chart title. So I'm just going to copy the content from column A, and I'm going to set that as the chart title. I'm not even sure if that'll record, but I'll do that. And that gives me that's a nice chart. It shows like the data that's being charted. It shows the 3 counties that I have selected. And I'd like to make it so that if I have 5 counties selected, it'll show all 5 counties and so forth. You go ahead and stop recording. Developer, stop recording. And let's see what we ended up with. Let's see. I have 3 modules. I already had 2 modules. Yeah, so it's made module 3 and called it macro 2, and here's my code. I'm just going to rename this. I'm just going to call this make chart. Maybe I'll put a comment on what this thing does. Builds the chart for the current row on the comparison sheet. Comparison. All right. Let's take a look at what it did. ActiveSheet.Shapes.AddChart2. This is crazy. The name of the method is AddChart2. What happened to AddChart? I don't know, but they didn't like that one, so they made another one called AddChart2. And it gives us a couple of parameters. 201, I don't know what that means. XL column clustered, I guess that's the kind of chart that we chose. But that's the kind of chart that I'm interested in building. So I think that is going to build it. Now you can see here that it's telling us what the data source is, but the truth is, if I build a chart with that data already selected on the sheet, it's going to do this part for me. It's going to go ahead and put that data source will already be built for it. We can see then that I moved it and did some kind of increment left. And I'm not really thrilled with the incrementing. It said move it over and up a little bit. We'll probably end up changing that. We're selecting it. We can see that we're changing the chart title property. We're changing the chart title's text property to some particular text here. So we've got some help here, but let's do a little better than what this is. Okay, someone tell me what's going on here. This is kind of weird. It says add chart to, gives it its arguments, and then it says dot select after it. So someone tell me what's going on with this first statement. How is it that I can say dot select after I say add chart? Go ahead. That's exactly right. So this add chart doesn't just add a chart to the sheet. It adds a chart to the sheet, and then it returns the reference to the object that it just created. And then, because this evaluates to an object, I can call the select method on it. I don't really want to select it, so let's delete the select method off the end. But let's capture the reference. I want to hold that in an object variable because I'm going to do some other stuff with it. So let me create a couple of variables, and we'll go kind of finish that line here in just a minute. But let me dim one called SHP as a shape. Oops, SHAPE. And then let me dim CHRT as a chart. So it turns out that when I put a chart onto a sheet, I can't just put a chart directly on the sheet. I put the chart into a shape that's on the sheet. So it seems a little strange because I don't create those separately. I say add a chart, and it goes, great. You're going to put a chart on this sheet. We're going to first put a shape, and then we're going to put a chart on the sheet. Now, which one do you think it's going to return? Which of these two do you think it's going to return? Is it going to return a reference to the shape that was created? Or is it going to return a reference to the chart that was created? You're thinking, hey, this is called add chart, so it's probably going to return a reference to the chart. I think it's going to return a reference to the shape. But you know what? We can figure that out. Let me just dim OBJ as an object without saying what kind of object it is. And let me, or OBJ, and then let me set OBJ equal to this. I've captured the reference that came back. I'll stop here so I can kind of poke at that and see what it's doing. All right, I'm going to run to that point. And let me just see what the type name of OBJ is. Ah, it's a shape. So it returned a reference to the shape that contains the chart. Now, and we might have been able to guess at that because the add method it's adding to the shapes collection. So the shapes collection is the collection of all the shapes that are on the sheet. We're adding a new shape onto the sheet, and so it's going to return a reference to the shape that was created. It's going to have a chart on the inside of it, but it's a reference to the shape. Okay, well, it turns out that the shape has a chart property, which is just a reference to the chart that's in the shape. So I'm going to set CHRT equal to, and let me stop my code here. Now that I'm sure that it's the shape that's coming back, I'm going to capture the shape object, and then I'll set my chart, CHRT, equal to my shape dot chart. So now I've got two different variables that are referring to the object that we're creating. Well, it must have added a chart. Yeah, there's a chart. It doesn't have any data in it, but here's my, oh, it's a shape object with no chart at all, it looks like. All right, I'm going to go ahead and delete my other chart off. And then let's just do a little housekeeping things. This only makes sense for this to run on the comparison sheet. So let's make sure we've activated that comparison sheet. So before I create the new chart, let's see, my comparison sheet is just called sheet 1. That's kind of a bad name. So I'm going to go based on its tab name, and let me make a, we'll just make sure we select it. So out of all the worksheets, this workbook dot worksheets. And we're looking for the one called comparison, and we'll activate it. So we know ACTIVATE. So we'll know that is the active, that is our active sheet. So when we say active sheet to add, that'll be just fine. So we'll have our shape and our chart. Let's do this. It only makes sense for us to add a chart if a couple of things are true. One, if the first column of our active row actually has a value, so it doesn't make sense to build a chart here, but it really doesn't make sense to build a chart on this one either. What would I be charting here? So I think we have to be at least on row 3. So let's get our row 3. So I'm going to dim row as a long integer. And probably also need to figure out what our last column is as an integer, long integer as well. There's only 16,000 columns. How many columns are there? I think I can get by with an integer for that. Let me just find out. Active cell dot column. Yeah, there's only 16,000 columns, so my column can be an integer. I'm not sure it was worth, that 30 seconds or so it took me to figure that out, to use 2 versus 4 bytes to store that number, but there we go. All right, again, before we create the chart, let's make sure that we're we now have the sheet selected. Let's do this. Let's say that row is going to be the active cells row. And then let's say if row is less than 3, then row equals 3. So if we're ending up, somewhere here on row 2 or 1, I'm not sure why I would ever want to chart the county codes. It don't make sense to chart those, but if someone really wants to chart them, I guess I'll let them chart them. So if it's less than 3, we're going to say, yeah, we're talking about, that being the row that we're after. Okay, so, and let's also do this. Let's say if it's, greater than 3, but whatever is in column A is empty, like it's down here somewhere, then let's put it up to, I guess we'll just hard code 85. Maybe we'll just do that here. If the row is less than 3, then the row equals 3. If row is greater than 85, then row equals 85. We'll just make sure that we're on some data in there. I'm okay with the 3. I'm uncomfortable with the 85 just because I can imagine this code changing and the data changing and having more there. Should we figure out what that row should be? Or should we just leave it at 85 and move on? Vote for me. Who says leave it at 85 and move on? Who says, no, let's figure out that it should be 85? It's like the vast majority of you are not even coming out to the polls. It's an election year, people. It's an election year. Maybe we'll come back and do it at the end if we've got a couple extra minutes. But for right now, we'll leave it hard-coded at 85. All right. So now I think my next step is to get my data selected. So to know what I'm going to select here, I'm going to need to figure out what my last column is. So let's set last call. It's going to be equal to, Now I know I'm going to have a value here, so I think I can come to A and just move to the right. I think that'll work. So I think I'm going to start in column 1 and do like an XL move to right. to find out where my last column is. So cells, now I'm not saying which sheet I'm on, so it's going to assume the active sheet, and that's okay. I'm okay with that because I have made sure I activated the sheet I'm interested in. So cells row number 1, column number 1, dot end, then I'll do XL to right. And that will refer to that cell, and then I'll just ask for the column. And that should be my last column. I'm going to just go ahead and run that in the immediate window and make sure that looks good. Yeah, that gives me a 4, and that would be column 4 as my last column. Okay, so now I've got my row and I've got my last call. I'm ready to start selecting the data. So let's go ahead and select that range. And I think the way I want to do it is with a multi-cell range. Last call. Okay, so here I'm going to say range, and I'm going to give it 2 references to a cell. So starting cell, ending cell, let's say dot select. My starting cell, cells, row number row, column number 2 is my starting cell. I'm always going to start in column 2. Yeah, column B is always going to have my data that's starting in. And my ending is going to be just the same, but instead of column 2, it'll be whatever my last column is that we just calculated. And that will then, if I'm on this row when I start, it will select that data there. Very nice. But now the trick is I also want to select this. I'm going to do a discontiguous range. Yikes. Fortunately, there's a union statement that allows me to create the union of 2 independent ranges. So I've got this one range selected here. Let me just I'm going to back off the select for a second. It'll be invalid syntax, but this is identifying my first range. Let me just make another one that identifies the next range. So it'll look just the same, but it's going to be row 1, column 2, to row 2, last column. That should be this block here. O starts in B1, and then O's end in row 2, but go as far wide as my last column indicates it should go. So now I've got those 2 ranges, but I want to union them into a single range, like to be selected. I want to select both of those 2 ranges at the same time. And so to do that, I'm going to use union, U-N-I-O-N. And it tells me I can give up to 30 ranges to work with. Great, I only need 2. Here's the first one. Here's my second one. I'll bring my second one up there. I think I will. And I'll close the parentheses for my union statement. And that will be the one range that has both of those discontiguous sub-ranges identified in it. And now I'll put the select on this. Whew, that's enough for me to want to run it to that point. Just make sure it looks good. So I'll put a stop in and run my code. And that should be SHP's chart. Okay, so let's just see if it selected it. I think my active cell might have been up there. Yeah, let me try it again with the active cell lower. We'll stop that and run it again. Ah, perfect. That's just what I wanted to have selected. So I've got my data selected, plus I've got my headers selected. So with it selected there, I think I'm ready to build the chart. Oh, and that's the next part here. Add the chart. So I'm going to run it to my next stop and just see what it does. Oh, beautiful. That's just the chart I was after. All right. Okay, any questions to what we've done so far? Okay. I think the next thing I want to do is get the label put onto the chart, because I've got that code down here. So here's active chart, chart title text. I'm going to go ahead and just pull this line up. And after I built the chart, let's go ahead and plug this one in. So active, I don't have an active chart anymore because I'm not selecting. It was the active chart because there was a shape selected and that shape had a chart in it, and that's what the active chart is. But fortunately, I've made a reference to the chart object that was created, right? I capture the reference to the sheet that gets created. Because I'm doing the add chart method, that shape is going to have a chart in its chart property. And so this should be just the reference to the chart that I'm after. So that charts, it has a property called chart title. And that chart title has a property called text. Man, I got to tell you, it took me like a half hour to figure that property out the first time I was looking at it. I probably could have got it faster if I was just Googling it, but it was like a matter of pride. I thought I could track it down. It took a while. I thought a chart should have a title property. No, it's got a chart title property. I thought I could change that. No, it's got a text property that you can change. So instead of having it hard coded, get rid of this, and I'll just reference the particular cells. Cells, row, column number 1, dot value. That should change the title of the chart. I'm going to run it. I'm going to get rid of my first stop, so I'm running past the chart creation before I stop. I'm going to delete my other chart and run my code. There we go. My active sheet was the ANSI code. That's a great chart. Wonderful. I'll try it again. I think it's about time for me to put a hotkey on this one. I have to go back and forth. So let's do that, and then we'll run this in again. Now I put a hotkey on here. We go to my developer tab, my list of macros. Got this one called make chart. And I guess I'm gonna do Control-Shift-C for this one. So I'm gonna come to options, put a capital C in there, build a chart. Now I should be able to Control-Shift-C. Oops, I'm in break mode. Stop myself in break mode, Control-Shift-C, and it should build the chart. I think the other thing that would probably be wise for us to do, I did that kind of quickly. Does anybody want to see that again? How to put the hotkey on the chart or the macro? Okay. So let's kind of get rid of what we don't need. So this code that it recorded for putting the data range in there, we're getting already by having the data selected. The incrementing, I'm not thrilled with that. We'll just move it with the top property. We're selecting it, cut copy mode, activate, chart paste. Yeah, I don't think we need any of that stuff. So no reason to have a stop because it's running the whole thing. But I think the other thing that would make sense for us to have is an easy way to clear off the charts as well. We're making a lot of charts, especially now that we have a hotkey on it. We'll probably be making them. So let's go ahead and delete the charts. So make another sub procedure here. Sub, delete all charts. Okay. So as it turns out, there's another kind of object called a chart object. We have a thing called a shape. It has a chart in it. We have a chart, which actually has the chart information. But there's another one called a chart object, which is just like, you know what? It is the set of shapes that have charts in them. So if I've got like other buttons and stuff on my form, I don't want to worry about them. I'm just after the shapes that have charts in them. So let's go ahead and let's iterate across all the chart objects. So I'll need a control variable, dim chrt as a chart object. For each chrt in active sheet dot chart objects. Next. For right now, I'm just going to do a debug.print of the chart's name. And let me come and build myself a few charts. Control Shift C, C, C. So I've got like 3 charts now. So I'm expecting to see this print off the names of 3 charts when I run. Oh, maybe I have 4. Chart 6, 7, 8, and 9. Do I really have 4? Yeah, there were 4 there. I counted wrong. But let me go ahead and like put a button on this form as well. Maybe I'll just put a button, maybe to delete the charts, I'll put right here. So I'm going to come to my developer tab, come to my insert tool control here, and I'll just take this first button and we'll call this is going to run delete, delete all charts and say okay. The whole point here is that I don't want to see this button showing up in my list of objects that I'm referring to. I'm going to come back to my VB code and I'll run that again. And so we can see it's only getting the shapes that have the charts in it. So now instead of printing that, I should be able to delete it. And so I think we've got a delete method. I think that will do it. Invalid qualifier. Oh, I don't want chart.name.delete. I want chart.delete. Now that iterates across all of the chart objects and just deletes them one at a time. The other thing I'd like to do is I'd like to move my active cell down each time I make a chart. So I can just kind of hit that hotkey several times and it will actually make a bunch of different charts. So after I've made the chart, let's just select the next row down. So, and maybe I'll actually select column A. So cells, row number, row +1. Column 1 dot select. What should I do if row is greater than 85? Go back to the top? I think we'll just let them go blank at that point. It's blank when we run it. I think it will just take us back to 85. So we'll make the last one a bunch of times. That's okay. All right. So now this is nice because now I should be able to say I want to make these next charts. So this one should give me resident population estimate total change. Control Shift C. And it's moving it down to the next one, and it's making the next one. So they're making now all the different charts. I've got a bunch of them now, and that's okay because I can delete them all at once. Oop, they're gone. Okay, but now what I'd like to do is I would like to put them, I don't want them going over my data at all. I want them to go to the right of my data. I got lots of space over here. So let's go ahead and position this. So I'm going to change the left property of that chart. Now, it turns out the chart fills up the whole shape. That's why when you change the size of that shape on the sheet, the chart grows with it. And so I don't really get to move the chart around. I'm going to move the shape that contains the chart. And so I made this object here, shape, to hold this container of the chart. So let's just do this. SHP dot left is equal to, what I wonder? How do we know where to put it? I mean, I could guess. Let's guess 100. Let's just see what that does. 100, that's what 100 is. There's 100. I don't know what it is of 100, but there's 100 of them between there and there. So it looks like I would need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't know, 6 or 7 of those. Let's try 7 and see where it goes. There's 700. That's not too bad. It puts it over here. But what's the problem about just putting it at 700 or 650 or something? What's the problem? I don't think it depends on the screen. I don't think it's 700 pixels because if I were to zoom in, that's now like 700 pixels would be way, well, 700 pixels, if it were pixels, it would still be in the same portion of the screen, but it's going to position it relative to the sheet. So it's different units. I don't know what they are. They're not pixels. They're something relative to the size of the sheet. But even if it is, O is going to put it right there, like halfway through column F. What's the problem? Well, right now they're going to stack, and we're going to make them, so we'll have to shift them down as well. But there's a problem with that left position. Like for the usability of this application that we're developing, there's a problem with the left position. Yeah, if we were to have, let's put on a few more charts here. Let's put on a few more counties that we're comparing. Whenever we're comparing charts. Now Control-Shift-C, and it's overlapping the data because it's always going to that position on the sheet. So I want to figure out where my last data ends. Good news, there's some properties just for that. So I've got my last column property. So I could say cells, row number 1, column number last call, and it has a left property. So let's delete this one. Let's delete all the charts. Control-Shift-C. Oh, hey, pretty good. It put it right on the left of that last column. It's not quite where I want it because it's overlapping my data. So what should I do? Oh, I'll use the right property. What was I thinking? There is no right property. You get a left, but you don't get a right. What is that about? Well, we just add a little bit more. We could say, you know what? It's going to have some space on it. I'm not sure how wide it's going to be because the name of the county determines how wide it is. I just push it over a little bit more. Oh yeah, I like it. Instead of doing that, just move it over one column. We'll find out where the next column is. I like that approach. The other possibility is, although I don't have a right property, it does have a width property. So I could add it to its width property, and that would do the same thing here, but this is simpler. In fact, I don't want it right up against that. I probably want a little bit of margin in there. So maybe I'll just create a variable for myself called margin. Even better yet, I'll make a constant. Const margin, margin equals 10. That's just a little bit. So I've made a constant. That's going to be 10, and now I will set it to the left of one past my last column, and I will add on to it my margin. So now, yeah, that gives me a little bit of space in there. I like that a little bit better. So now if I create another one, it's going to go right on top of it. So that's still a problem. But I probably don't really want to start. Oh yeah, this is just showing up wherever I've changed the left. I haven't changed the top property at all. So why don't we push it to the top of our set so that we can kind of make them go in one right above the other. So let's set the left to that. And then let's also set the shape or the top property just equal to margin. That'll just give it a little bit down from the top. That's good. I like it. But now we'd like the next one to go right below it. Oof. Talk to me, people. What should we do? Oh, I can ask how big the shape is. Good. But the trouble is, when I put the first one on, I want it to go right there. It's only when I put the next, like anything after the first one, that I want it to start going down. So let's do this. If we're doing if we've got just one shape, we've got just one chart shape. Yeah, if we have just one, this is what we want to do. But if there's more, then we want to look down. Okay, so let's say if, how can we tell how many charts we have? Just count the chart objects collection. Yeah, if active sheet. In fact, maybe we should make a variable for this. Because it's going to get kind of long. I think we're going to use the chart count multiple times. Let's make one. Yeah, let's make a variable for this. Let me just dim chart count as an integer. I don't think I have more than 32,000 charts on my worksheet. And I will say that my chart count is equal to active sheet dot chart objects dot count. Okay, so now if my chart count, what do I expect it to be the very first time I make a chart? Well, I've already made the chart. Right, I create the chart here. So if I start with no charts and I add another one, I'll have one chart here. So if it's equal to 1, that's the special case. So if my chart count is equal to 1, then I'm going to do that. I'll probably want to move some of these out. Yeah, let's just do the top this way. If the chart count is 1, then the top margin is going to be margin. Else, the top is going to be something else. What's the top going to be? What's that? We could look, yeah, I think we can use our chart count to get at it's going to be the same height that we just created here. We can use just the height of the one we just created. So it's already shaped. Yeah, let's just do that. They're going to be the same size. SHP dot height plus margin. I don't want it, the height. Actually, I want it to be the top. I want it to be the top of, yeah, I got to look at the last one because it has to go down. It has to be the top of the last one plus the height of the last one. Or I could just multiply it by the chart count. I'd have to also figure in the margin into that as well. I think I'm just going to actually get a reference to the chart. Let's do that. Let me get a reference to the second to the last chart. So I've got my chart count right here. Yeah, we could. But I want to get a reference to the chart. Let's do this. Let me declare a variable here. Up with my other ones here. How do I say second to the last chart? And ultimate. Oh, that's a long variable. Oh, but it's actually a shape. I think I'll call it penultimate chart, but it's going to be a shape. That's not confusing. All right, then let's just hook up to that chart. Here, if it's chart 1, there is no penultimate chart. Otherwise, there will be. So set penultimate chart equal to active sheet dot chart objects sub chart count. Oops. -1. I have 2. That would be the number 1. Yeah, that should be good. All right, so if there's more than 1, I want the top of this one to be equal to the penultimate chart's top plus my shape's height plus the margin. I like the idea of just doing it on the math without attaching to either chart. But the problem is, after we get so many, I don't want to keep going down. I want to be able to go over. And then it's going to change. Then I'm definitely going to need that reference to the last chart to know where it is. I think it's going to be helpful this way. Okay, and then we're setting the left equals, so we'll have to get more sophisticated with this at some point, but I think this is going to get us going. Let me clear off my charts and let's add some charts. First one, type mismatch. Penultimate chart. Oh, you know what? I think this has to be a chart object. Since I'm actually connecting on to one of the chart objects here. Delete charts, Control-Shift-C. I like it. There they go. Look at all those great charts. I'm a chart making fiend. I'll delete those. So that's good so far. I like it. But we now have the issue of, we got all this screen estate off here to the right that we're not using. Maybe once we get down past our data, we probably should head back up to the top. Let's do this. Maybe the simple way to do that is that after we've positioned it, let's look at where that chart is. So we've done the chart by here. So we haven't set the left, but we've set the chart top. So let's do this. Let's say if our shape's top is greater than, and I want to know if it's past the top of my last cell. If my chart top is greater than where that last cell is, I got to make an adjustment. It's time to go back up to the top. Here's where it would be nice to know where that last one is. So let's take a minute and go actually figure out where that last one is. So we've got last column. Let's also get ourselves a last row. So I'll just copy my last call. We'll make that into a last row. Equals cells. And I think on this one, I want to start at the very bottom. So row number, rows.count. That's the very last row. Column number 1, and end, I'll do an XL up. That should come up until it hits data, and I'm after the row here. So last row is the number of the last row that I'm after. So now I'm just going to bring my, so that should be 85. Let me just check and make sure that really is 85. Not row.count, but rows.count. Cells, rows.count, 85. So that is producing 85. So that's great. Now that I've got the 85, let me just kind of move this block that I'm adjusting. I'll just move this below the calculation. Then I can refer to the 85 with its variable name instead of its absolute value. But now I've got that last row in a variable that I can use to check if my charts are going too far down. So if shape.top is greater than cells, row number, last row, column number, doesn't matter which column number, they're all those, each column has the same height, top. All the cells in a given row have the same top. If that's greater than the top of that, then I want to do something. And what do I want to do? In that case, I want it to go back up to the top and move it over. There may be a better way to do this, but let's start it off here. So let's go ahead and move the, I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, at this point, we're coming up here. So set my shape back to the top. But now we're going to say that the left, in this case, is going to be oh, just the position of our, it's going to be the left of our last one. Going up, it's going to be move it over from wherever the last one was. So our left is going to be, instead of like going after the cells here, we want to do this only, I think, on our very first one. So I'm going to put this line of code up with when we're on our very first chart. If we're on any other chart, we're just going to put it to the left of the one before. Unless we're in this situation, and then we want to move it over. Okay, so let's go ahead and put an else in here. So we're having a special case when we've just gone down past the end. We'll figure out the left for that one. But in every other case, we want the left of this one to be equal to the left of the penultimate chart. So whatever our last chart was is left, that's where we want it to be. We just want it to match the last one. But we don't quite want it to do that on the case where we're bumping back up to the top. So in that case, we want it to be wherever the left one was, plus the width of our current chart, because they're all the same size. shp.width plus a margin. So when we've pushed down past the bottom, we're going to come back up to the top. We're going to set the top back to the top of the page. And the left is going to be whatever the left of our last one was, plus the width of our chart that we're adding, plus a little space. I think that will do it. Ooh, wow. I think in past times I've done this example, I've always tried to kind of calculate where it was going to go and place it once. In this case, we're placing it, we're noticing that it's too low, and then we're moving it. That's probably okay. Let's see what it looks like. Rows.count, corrected in the immediate window, but not down below. And my last call, I got to create the variable before I can use it. Must have option explicit selected. I do. I copied it and then I typed it again. Oh, okay. So the problem is that on our very first time through this, we don't have a penultimate chart. So just want to get the left of it. I think I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to set the, it's kind of cheating. I could set the penultimate chart object equal to the object that I'm on, and that would solve the problem. Because the problem is happening here is that it doesn't know what the penultimate chart is. But this is only a problem when it's not the first one. So maybe I just need to put this whole block inside the else. Let's do that. So here, if it's the first one, I know exactly where to put it. Otherwise, we're going to follow these rules. Yeah, I think that's better. So I'll clear that one off. Try it again. Must be in debug mode. Control-Shift-C. I'm chart happy. I like it. Questions? Yes.
Can you just go back to your
So what we came up with was, if it's the special case of it being the very first one, we just put it in that upper left-hand corner. Otherwise, we follow these rules to place it. Now, the one thing I'm not quite thrilled about is that we're setting the top here, and then we're checking to see if we need to change the top. So it might make a little more sense for us to look and see if we should place it there. I don't know, but this code is simple this way. It's going to get a little bit more complex. And what's the problem? It actually places it down below and then it moves it to the top. That happens so fast. I don't think it's a problem. I think I'm going to leave it this way. I think I'm going to prefer the simpler code, even though it has the defect of placing the chart and then moving it. I don't think it's a big deal. What else can I tell you about charts? That's about it. Like, that's the whole example. How did I finish this example 15 minutes ahead of schedule? 18 minutes ahead of schedule. I don't know. Hey, when's our next project due? Is it Monday? I don't know. If you have questions on that, maybe if you've started that, you have questions, we can handle that. Otherwise, let's call it good for today. Thanks for coming. That's working with charts. And I will see you next week. If you have a question on your project, oh yeah, thank you. Oh, thank you. You got any individual questions? I'll hang around for a little bit. You can come on down. Will you keep the up for a little bit? Yes, I will.